Welcome back to Without Shortcuts. Today we are doing a classic with creme brulee. Now, creme brulee is one of those things you see it at all these fancy restaurants. It's kind of a big deal. Everybody loves it. It seems really complicated and specific and, tedious, but the reality is it's just a few ingredients. It's very easy, a couple little techniques here and there, and you can absolutely do this at home and it will be incredible. So the first thing we need to do to make creme brulee is we need to separate out a couple of eggs.
And if you have access to farm fresh eggs, that's totally the way to go. It's just a better overall product. So thank you to my sister and brother-in-law for the eggs that we've got here today. When you're separating your eggs, you want to make sure that you're not getting any yolks into the whites, because hopefully you're saving the whites to use for another purpose, like, I don't know, like maybe making an angel food cake to put into a video for next week.
Novel
Who
idea.
knows? But as I found, the best way to ensure that you're not getting any yolks into your whites, use a small bowl like Doug's doing here, separate each one individually. That way you make sure that you've got no yolk into your white. You can dump that into the bowl and you're not contaminating your whites. The other thing that you want to do as we're getting this going is also get a kettle of water boiling on the stove. That'll come into play a little bit later.
What, you can't separate eggs one-handed?
Not today.
Once your eggs are all separated out, the next thing you need to do is get your cream, half of your sugar, and your vanilla onto the stove and start warming those up.
We've got our cream, half of our sugar, and the vanilla in a saucepan on the stove. We're just going to whisk that together. And then we're going to slowly heat this up over kind of a low, maybe a medium low heat. You want to heat it up really gently. You definitely don't want to bring it up to a boil. Just look for, as the bubbles start to form around the edges, that's how you know your cream's warm enough.
While our cream and sugar are warming up on the stove, the next thing we need to do is get our egg yolks ready to go. So we're going to take the rest of our sugar, pour that into our yolks. We're going to take just our little bit of salt, add that, and then you could certainly do this by hand. It's not really that much extra work, but if you have a hand mixer, this works even better. You're just going to mix these all together until they come nice and smooth and they get to what's called the ribbon stage, and you'll be able to see exactly what that means just from the texture. So you'll notice as you're mixing these that they'll lighten up in color, and once they start to lighten up and you can kind of see that nice fluffy texture on them, there we go. You know that you've mixed them up enough and they are ready to go.
Our cream is warmed up. We've got a little bit of steam coming off. We had some bubbles around the edge, so we know it's ready. So now we've got our warm cream and our cold egg yolks and sugar, and we need to get these together in order to make our creme brulee. But if we just dump all the cream into the egg yolks or vice versa, then we end up with scrambled eggs, which has its own place, but not in creme brulee.
No. Scrambled eggs with a bunch of sugar and vanilla in them, not so good.
Exactly. So what we have to do is what's called tempering our eggs. We want to slowly bring the temperature of the eggs up to closer to the temperature of the cream, so that then we can mix them together and they'll come together without overcooking the eggs. In order to do that, what we're going to do is, as we're stirring the egg yolks, in this case with the mixer just on low speed, we're going to slowly introduce some of the warm cream, kind of a cup or so at a time, to slowly bring that temperature up.
When you're doing this, just take your time and do it slowly and make sure everything comes together.
Once you've got, you know, about 2 cups, you know, so half to maybe 2/3 of your cream mixed into the egg yolks, that's brought the temperature of the egg yolks up enough to where we can just kind of slowly add the rest of this in here, and it'll all be okay. We won't end up scrambling anything.
And you can tell, I mean, this isn't going to be super hot, so you can feel the side of your bowl, and you should be able to tell that, oh yeah, this is coming up to temperature, I should be good to go.
Right.
And just like that, now we have custard. So this is basically ready to go, and I mean, once it's baked, we'll have creme brulee. Now to make it easier, we're going to take this out of our mixing bowl. We're going to pour it into our large measuring glass, just because this will make it easier to pour into our ramekins. Now if you make this with vanilla beans, at this point you want to make sure that you run this through a sieve so that you get all the chunks and pieces out of it. And you can do that anyway, just to make sure you don't have any chunks of egg that have cooked or anything. But we know this one's nice and smooth. We'll have a few bubbles in it, but those will come out in the very end process when you put the sugar on the top anyway. So this is ready to go. We just need to fill our ramekins. Now just for kicks and giggles, we figured we're going to do half of this as just regular vanilla creme brulee. But just to show some of the possibilities, we're also going to make half of these as chocolate creme brulee. You can add just about anything right at this point. I mean, berries of different sorts, a little bit of bourbon. I mean, seems like we add bourbon to a lot of things.
True.
But you can add just about anything right here. I mean, espresso works really well. And if you're going to do a different kind of flavor, this is the point where you want to make sure it's incorporated.
Absolutely.
For ours with the chocolate, we are going to put this back onto the heat just to make sure that the chocolate melts enough and is nice and smooth throughout the rest of our creme brulee. So we're going to go back over to the stove and get that mixed in.
So we've warmed the custard back up. It's starting to steam just a little bit, so we know it's warm enough. So we'll go ahead and shut the heat off, and then we've got just a couple of ounces of dark chocolate that we're going to put right in here. And then we'll give that a quick stir just to make sure all the chocolate's in there, and then we'll let it sit for a couple of minutes just to melt that chocolate. Once the chocolate's melted, we'll give it one more quick stir until everything's nice and smooth, and then we'll put this into the ramekins. The chocolate's all melted, we got everything stirred together, so the chocolate creme brulee is going to go into the ramekins.
When you're filling your ramekins, you want them to be as close to the same amounts as you can get in each one, because when they bake, these are fairly specific as far as keeping them at the right temperature. So you want them to be the same temperature through all of them when they finish baking, so that they'll all have a very similar consistency. Except for that one. That one doesn't count.
That one's a little short, but that's all right.
So when the ramekins are filled, this is when our hot water from the stove comes back into play that we started earlier in the video. The next thing we're going to do, we're going to take a deep pan, in this case a cake pan, and you're going to put all your ramekins in it and kind of keep them all pushed to one side so that you leave yourself a little bit of room. So once you get those in there, you're going to pour the boiling water into the bottom of this pan. And what the water is going to do is it's going to create a really even heat across the entirety of this pan so that everything's cooking at the same temperature, top to bottom, side to side, and it's going to give you that really nice smooth consistency throughout the creme brulee.
And you want enough hot water in there to go at least halfway up the ramekins, like half to 3/4 of the way up.
But make sure you don't get any of the water into any of the ramekins because that will destroy your creme brulee quickly.
And that would be a shame.
Perfect. And then we will finagle our other ramekins in there. So these are ready to go. We're just going to put them in the oven. It's preheated to 300 degrees. We'll put it in there for about 40 minutes or until you have just a little bit of jiggle left in the middle of each of your creme brulees. So we'll toss them in there. We'll come back and we'll see what comes out. So your creme brulee should jiggle just a little bit. It's hard to see on the camera, but it'll jiggle just a little bit, and when it does that in the middle, you're all finished up and you can take it out.
We've taken the creme brulee out of the oven. The next step is to let them cool for a little bit, and in order to do that, we need to take them out of the water bath and stick them onto a cooling rack. You can certainly do that with a pair of tongs, but Doug has another option for you.
So if you've ever done any canning and you have a canning jar lifter to remove your jars out of your hot water bath, that actually works really well, and I've dropped a lot fewer creme brulees by using this than by using those. So today we will just use those, get a good grip, nice and slowly, and just set them on your rack.
So these are going to sit on the rack and cool for about a half hour, and then once they've cooled for a little bit, we'll just cover them in plastic and then stick them in the fridge.
And once you get them in the fridge, you want to make sure that they cool all the way through. Otherwise your texture will be a little bit off, and you don't want that. You already put the time in to do these right, so finish them off, put enough time in, let them cool all the way before you enjoy them.
We've let our custard sit in the fridge overnight, so things have set up really nice. It's cooled down, and now we're going to show you how to turn it into creme brulee.
The creme brulee portion is exactly the sugar on top, and then we're just going to caramelize it nicely. Mm-hmm. Realistically, you don't have to do this part because these, as they sit, delicious. They're wonderful.
Absolutely.
But we are making creme brulee. We're going to do something delicious here. We're going to add a nice little texture and just that little bit of bitterness from the burnt sugar. So to do that, first we need the sugar on the top. We're just going to take a spoon, nice even coating of the sugar over the top of both of these. Alright, and then for the brulee part, you can take these, if you get all of the creme brulees you've done and you put the sugar on the top, and then you can put them in the oven right up underneath the broiler. Totally works. It'll caramelize your sugar. It takes a little patience. It takes some practice to really get them nice and even. It is definitely easier if you just have a brulee torch to do it with. If you're going to do this very often, it's definitely worth having a brulee torch. They're not terribly expensive and definitely worth it. So we're going to use our torch. We're just going to caramelize some of this sugar around the edges, and then we'll come back and we'll give it a little taste. So that's the brulee portion of the creme brulee. So we're gonna go ahead and give this a taste, see what we've done. Now the correct way of doing this, you have that nice little shell of sugar over the top of it. It's nice, crunchy, and you're gonna just take your spoon, you're gonna tap it and break that portion up so that you can get a little bit of that with each bite.
Man, dude, you can't beat homemade custard. That is so good. It's so rich. It's set up really, really well. It's really creamy. And then you get that that added texture from the broken sugar. Give it just a little bit of crunch. Man, that's good.
Yeah, and it's like with the chocolate one, it's light. It's not like a mousse where it's overpowering sweetness.
Right.
Just that smooth, easy. I mean, such a good way to finish any meal.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at what it takes to actually do it, like the effort on this is non-existent. It's so easy to do.
Right.
Absolutely worth it. Just wonderful.
Definitely. So, if you've never made it before, give this a try. If you have, let us know down in the comments how it's gone for you in the past. What other versions you've done, different things that you've mixed into your creme brulee. So, in the meantime, hit us up on social media, check our Instagram, hit us up on Twitter, and until the next time, skip the shortcuts.
Thanks, guys.